What is it with Democrats and freaky, violent sexual perversions that get them kicked out of office or make them lose their jobs? Well, the most recent Democrat to go down in a disgraceful ball of fire is none other than New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Now, this is the guy who had been cooperating with Robert Mueller to try to take down Team Trump out of some political grievance because, of course, the president of the United States can't pardon state-level crime. So Mueller was sharing information with this disgusting pervert to try to take out Team Trump should Mueller's federal investigation fail. If you haven't seen the news on Schneiderman that broke late yesterday, he was forced to resign in disgrace after 4 women accused him of beating them, typically during sex and after he was drunk. One of the women, who's a bit darker skinned, his longtime mistress, said he forced her to call him master, and he would call her his brown slave, and she had to tell him she was his property. If she didn't do it, he would beat her pretty severely, choking her until he cut off her airway. Other women said that he merely hit on them, and when they rejected his advances, he smacked them so hard in the face with an open hand that they had a welt for days. This guy was the Attorney General of New York State, living out, and he still is until close of business today, living out these perverse sexual fantasies by beating women. This, the New Yorker broke the story, and here are some of the excerpts from that story. Let me find it for you. I just had to close something on my screen there. Now, this guy, remember, Eric Schneiderman, big liberal, champion of the hashtag #MeToo movement, while he's beating women without their consent. These women are just, their stories are horrific. Now, Schneiderman issued a very unbelievable statement. Let's put it that way. I don't believe this for a second. He said, quote, "In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross." Now, the women aren't alleging that he raped them. No, they're saying that he would become more sexually aroused if he beat them without their consent. And their stories are here. Here's one woman. She says after about 4 weeks, a woman named Manning Barish said she began to see signs of controlling and abusive behavior soon after she started dating Schneiderman. He had her remove a tattoo from her wrist. She said he was trying to control her by, quote, taking a strong woman and tearing her to pieces in his jam. After they became physically involved, sexual, I guess, he became violent, she says. One night, they were in the bedroom of his Upper West Side apartment, still clothed but getting ready for bed, and lightly baiting each other, flirting. As she recalls it, he then called her a whore. She talked back. They had both been drinking. Her recollection of the conversation, she says, is blurry, but what happened next remains vivid. Schneiderman, she says, backed her up to the edge of his bed and all of a sudden just slapped her. These are her quotes. "All of a sudden, he just slapped me open-handed with great force across the face, landing a blow directly onto my ear. It was horrendous. It just came out of nowhere. My ear was ringing. I lost my balance and fell backward onto the bed. I sprang up, but at this point, there was very little room between the bed and him. I got up to try to shove him back or take a swing. He pushed me back down. He then used his body weight to hold me down and began to choke me. The choking was very hard. It was really bad. I kicked in every fiber. I felt I was being beaten by a man," end quote. Said she was crying and in shock. Now, her stories mirror those of the 3 other women. The novelist Salman Rushdie, who also dated this same woman before Schneiderman did, and they remained close friends, says that she confided this to him. And the version she's telling today comports with the version she told him when it happened. So it's a believable story. These women are not alleging that they were sexually abused. They're not out there looking for money. These are all established women in their own right. This woman, Manning Barish, very successful. The other woman who was forced to call him master, Harvard graduate. So these are not women looking for a payday. They do fine in their own right. These allegations are coming from some very credible sources. Now, this woman, Manning Barish, said she sought medical help from Dr. Gwen Korovin, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and she shared her medical record with the New Yorker. The medical records confirm that the doctor removed dried, bloody crust, pretty bad visual, from her ear, and she thought the slap might have caused the injury. But when Korovin asked her what happened, she said she might have injured herself with a Q-tip. The woman, Manning Barish, claims she was protecting Schneiderman, and she was ashamed. Korovin was asked, the doctor was asked by the New Yorker if the injury could have been caused by a slap, and she said yes, it could have been consistent with a slap, with a Q-tip, or a slap. And so inconclusive, but the account of the event, I always tell you, timeline is everything in an investigation. The account of the event, the date of the event, when Schneiderman supposedly physically abused this woman in relation to when she went to the doctor, and there were signs of a recent injury in her ear, from an evidentiary perspective, support her claim. And it wouldn't be the first woman who lied to a doctor, lied to police because they were ashamed about being assaulted, or they were afraid of the perpetrator and they wanted to protect him. Believe me, wouldn't be the first, won't be the last. It's more common than the victims who initially come forward in many respects, especially when the guy is very powerful. Now, that's the bigger problem here. You've got an incredibly powerful person in the Attorney General of New York, tremendous relationships around the country politically, know all the Wall Street power brokers who don't want to get on their bad side. These women were terrified. These women were terrified. And the stories go on and on and on. I mean, this guy was a serial, sadistic physical abuser, still is. What a bad guy. I mean, what a terrible, terrible guy. Now, this is, Eric Schneiderman is just one in a long list of political scandals in New York. The New York Times did a story, The Many Faces of New York Political Scandals, going back a decade. Over 30 current or former state office holders in New York have been convicted of crimes, sanctioned, or otherwise accused of wrongdoing. They put 30 of them up there. Of the 30, 25 are Democrats. 25 are Democrats. You know what this tells me? Tammany Hall is alive and well in New York. But this Schneiderman case is particularly bad in light of all of these other allegations that I'm going to tell you all about, and in light of the fact that Schneiderman was cooperating with Robert Mueller, earlier in the segment, was cooperating with Robert Mueller to try to bring down members of Team Trump in a way that would be impervious to federal pardon, a presidential pardon. And I'm going to tell you all about that on my longer show, Off the Cuff Declassified, today, right here on The Rebel. This is really, really important subject matter. When we have corrupt officials who physically abuse women and then hide behind the power of their office, these are stories we have to do every day. And I'm going to dig in very, very deep after the mainstream media moves on from this. We're always going to bring you the updates on this case. I want to be able to do that every day. So subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows.